Welcome back, Raider Nation, to another edition of Silver and Black Today, an Aussie Sports Original podcast, brought to you by our good friends at Sleeper Picks and Hog Media. The Raiders, 41-24 losers to the Washington Commanders. They now move to 1-2 on the season, 2 losses in a row in what was just, from the very beginning, like last week, just an ugly game. The Raiders could not get their offense moving. The defense got gashed early, special teams. Listen, Raider Nation, no way to sugarcoat it. A complete failure on all 3 levels of the game. As I mentioned, special teams from the beginning of the game. Of course, the kick return for a touchdown as well. Not to mention the defense, for the first time all season, really got run over and struggled throughout. Do us a favor. If you don't already subscribe to our show, please do so. Wherever you get your audio, look for Silver and Black Today. Also, do us a favor, rate and review there, and we appreciate that too. If you're watching us on video, of course, we are live right now. Make sure you subscribe, whatever channel you're in. We're also being simulcast with our buddies at Raiders Fan Radio. And of course, joining me, as he does on all the post-game shows with the voice of the fan, is my good buddy Murph. And Murph, this is a tough one for fans. You know, a lot of, I think, hope that after last week, the Raiders would right the ship. They had a great opportunity going to Washington. Yes, going across to the East Coast on a short week is tough, no question about it. But the Commanders, without their quarterback, their dynamic quarterback, Jaden Daniels, of course, Austin Eckler out. They had a set of other injuries. It really looked like it was set up for the Raiders to go on the road, get right, and get a big win before coming home to host the winless as of right now. Kickoff's about to start with the Chicago Bears, but they are winless. They'll be in Las Vegas next week. But Murph, this one overall, from the very beginning, it just had that feeling like we had last week.
Yeah, I'd like to thank the Raiders for relieving me of the burden of expectation, Scott. You know, here we are in week 3, and frankly, going into this game, I even sent a message to our one of our group chats about the idea that I didn't think this was going to happen, but I felt like it was going to happen. And I was this close to doing a little, Twitter blurb early on, like a little video thing, whatever. But I thought, no, I don't want to be negative. I don't want to come out of the gate negative. We're just going into week 3. We're 1-1. The Raiders got a lot to play for here. This team was set up to be taken advantage of, with Jaden Daniels being out, with, of course, Austin Eckler being out for the year. Dedrick Wise is out for the year. There's a 7th-round running back we're going up against today. It was like everything was setting up, so I didn't want to just come out negative. But sure enough, Scott, here we are. And so I never thought that this season was going to go this way, this fast. And it's just mind-boggling. And the common theme amongst us Raider fans are, you've heard me say this before on the show, but it's the truth every year. It doesn't matter what city we play in. It doesn't matter who the owner is. It doesn't matter who the quarterback is. Doesn't matter who the head coach is. Doesn't matter who the coordinators are. It's the same stuff. And people were on the Twitters there, and they're like, Murph, I look forward to the post-game show, and I hope you're going to take a flamethrower to the organization, and blah, blah. And I'm like, and as much as I would love to do that, and I'm sure all my emotion will come out at some point, but Scott, I want to appeal to you with something that, because you and I are of a similar age, and
yep,
there's something about when the Raiders are just down bad like this, and it brings out other things about the NFL. And I'm not trying to be a total sad sack here, but the flag footballization of the NFL, the way that it's officiated nowadays, and the power that is in the flag. I saw Puka Nacua got that stupid taunting penalty called on him today for pointing at the end zone. Like this over-officiated nature of the game. I don't like the way it's covered by mainstream media. When you look at the 4-letter networks and the things, the way they cover it, it's an absolute joke. And then when you add the Raiders in there as sucking, it just like, is it just me getting old? And if it's my age, I will own it. But the NFL is just not as fun as it used to be. I don't find myself, even when the Raiders are bad, like, well, okay, at least I get to go watch these other teams and, can appreciate the play of other players. Now I'm just like, it's just kind of wearing off on me. And again, it's on the heels of this Raider team just doing the same old crap every week. And so, Scott, do you get that sense at all, or am I making too big of a deal out of it?
No, I watch a lot of games, obviously, with the other work I do too, covering the other part of the league, as does Mo. So we talk a lot about it on our show. I think that, yes, I think there is some of that because the game, and it's always about safety. But, you see some of these calls, you see what's happening. Now, listen, The Raiders did not lose today because of that. And that's not what you're saying. I know that.
No,
but you're right. It does suck some of the fun out of it for those of us over the age of 30 who remember the NFL one way. And I'm not saying that you go back and you allow some of the stuff that used to happen in the 70s and 80s, because that is about player safety. Guys are bigger now. They're faster, all of that. So I get it. But at the same time, they do take a lot of the fun out of the game. But for me, watching this one too, what took the fun out of it in covering the Raiders was the fact that they just came out, they looked flat. Again, the offensive line was even worse than it was. We're going to talk about Brennan Carroll, because Brennan Carroll's not working. The experiment has failed. And yes, I understand the cries of nepotism. It's Pete Carroll's son. I get that. The NFL is stock full of nepotism all over the place. But a lot of those guys that are hired by their dads, their uncles, whoever, they actually succeed. In this case, Brennan Carroll's not succeeding. I saw a lot of criticism of specific players on the offensive line, which was fair. When you were watching the game, you saw Dylan Parham often come off the line and block no one and just be standing there by himself. You saw a lot of plays blown up at the line. You got to credit, of course, the Commanders for doing that up front. They had a good game. They also had great coverage. Remember that. They had great coverage on the back end, which helped the defensive front pressure and sack Geno Smith 5 times in today's game. So you see that. But to me, that was just such a big deal, Murph, because everybody knew coming into this season that the offensive line was not really up to snuff. They did play better at the end of last season. So what changed? Okay, you had position change. The Jordan Meredith to center. Jackson Powers-Johnson moves over, gets hurt, doesn't start today, even though he's healthy. We put Alex Kappa in there again. That didn't work either. And I was resistant to saying, well, yeah, put JPJ back at center like everybody was after week 1. But now I'm like, you know what? I think you, with the exception of Colton Miller, who didn't have a great game today either, but with the exception of him, I think you put guys in there. They can't do worse. Am I wrong in saying that? That I don't care who's on the bench. Put them in, because at this point, it's not working. I'd put Jackson Powers-Johnson back at center, and I would see what else you're going to do on that line, because it's not working. But I think there's enough talent. I'm not saying this offensive line is anywhere near where it needs to be. It needs more talent, no question. So I agree with you all out there. At the same time, they're also not being coached well. They're not being developed well. When you see degradation from week to week and you see simple things like scheming and blocking not happening, to me, you also got to put a lot of blame on the coaching.
100%. And that's, regression is the ultimate indictment of bad coaching. When you have regression on the field, and clearly this offensive line has regressed, Scott, and it's brutal. Like I would throw it out there with some of the worst offensive lines we've seen in this Raiders history since 2002. And especially when you look at, like, I sent out a tweet earlier about, like, and had the picture of the 2016 Raiders offensive line. And it was like, remember when we used to just bitch about Austin Howard once in a while? Like, that seems like 150 years ago. Yeah. This offensive line is just awful, and especially when our best offensive lineman, Colton Miller, he's getting bullied too. So it's like, even the guy that's supposedly the best out of the squad is getting bullied out there, and the other guys don't know what the hell they're doing. I don't understand it. I don't understand why you have Dylan Laube back there on pass blocking downs. What the hell is he doing back there? And we'll get in the run game later, but that whole idea, Scott, and listen, I understand, because I'm with you. Nepotism is a thing in the NFL. It is a thing in coaching. Ask the Harbaugh family. Like, it happens, man. And so I don't begrudge Pete for giving his kid a role. Where I do begrudge is that Pete overseeing, with the lengthy history he has in the league, should have enough influence to be able to influence the coaching on this offensive line. Joe Philbin, I brought up Joe Philbin like for the past 2 weeks now, because he's a senior offensive assistant, and a lot of folks were coming at me going like, Joe Philbin doesn't do it. It's Pete's son. Pete's gonna. Joe Philbin is sitting next to Chip Kelly in the booth. Don't tell me Joe Philbin, a guy that's a career offensive line coach, doesn't have influence over this team. So if he doesn't have influence over this team, and that's the actuality of it, well, then get Brennan Carroll out of the damn building and give it to Joe. Or is Brennan Carroll figuring it out along the way, has a mentor in Joe Philbin, and Joe Philbin is an abject disaster as an offensive line head coach? Whatever the scenario is, something has to change, because the bottom line, Scott, is, well, here we go. Everybody wanted me to get fiery, now you're getting it. So the bottom line, Scott, is that the optics are trash. The optics of this thing are awful. Like, and so whether it's because it's his kid or otherwise, what is it? Because when we're watching it on fit, like, I'm not even a tape guy. I'm not a former athlete. I'm not a freaking, well, I'm not professional anyways, but like, no, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't have the bona fides of like tape guys or even guys like Ted Wynn out there, you know, Brian Baldinger. These guys are like studying this stuff and can dissect it and present it. So my dumbass eyes can watch on TV and see the abject failure that it is, and it's confusion. Well, what is confusion? Why are they confused? Because they're not prepared. Right. Why are they not prepared? Because coaching isn't getting them prepared. So that's, you know what I'm saying? So whatever the reason is, and if we can point at a million different things and we don't know because we're not in the building, but whatever it is, the Raiders have got to make a change. Because like what you said, whether that's shuffling around personnel or whatever the case may be, don't do what you've always done because you're just going to get what you've always got. So we got to do something different to try to shake this thing up, because if we go at this rate, that whole saving Ashton Genty for the second half of the season, so we can get our second win.
Yeah, well, let me tell you something. I think I was critical a lot last year of Antonio Pierce not having a prepared team. So I want to be equally critical, and the buck stops at the top with Pete Carroll. Yeah, his son obviously not doing well with the offensive line, but the defense wasn't prepared either. This Commanders team ran all over. They gave up 201 yards in rushing. Now, before people start blaming Patrick Graham, which of course he does, they weren't prepared, but this defensive unit didn't perform well either. After performing exceptionally well in the first 2 weeks, they were in the top 5, right, in run defense in the NFL coming into this game, and they just get manhandled. Every play, almost every single play at the line of scrimmage was an absolute disaster. Yes, the Raiders had their way. Later on, they padded their numbers. Look, I give Geno Smith credit. He didn't throw an interception. He did not turn the ball over like he did 3 times last week. A lot of people were critical of Geno Smith. I'm not critical of Geno Smith. Am I saying he's your quarterback for 5 years? No, I'm not. I've never said that. But, Murph, that offensive line, when you're running for your life constantly, you can't be effective. I don't care who you are. You're not going to be effective. So again, that's why I said all 3 levels of this game, special teams, offense, defense, all of it was bad. So you can blame who you want to blame. And everybody I see in the chat, they're blaming all that stuff. And yes, I know I have Raider Enterprises here saying they had 171 in the first half. And yes, they went over 200. It doesn't matter. It's still 200 yards. You don't, they hadn't given up more than 80 in a game previous to this. So it was a big deal, especially when your top running back is out, your quarterback is out. And yes, we know Marcus Mariota has got some wheels, but even things like when they force the fumble on Mariota on the long run, they get the ball back, they do nothing with it because they can't move the offense. Complementary football matters. The defense does make a stop. The offense can't do anything. Defense gets out there too long. But the defense actually wasn't out there that long. We had the long plays on special teams, which put them in a rough spot. That's absolutely fair to say that. At the same time, it goes back to not being prepared. The coaching staff on this one has to take the big L because they went out there. The game plan was awful. They did not. I mean, listen, it was the Trey Tucker game. One bright spot. Trey Tucker, 3 touchdowns. He's the only guy who seemed to create any space. Jakobi Meyers made a couple of nice little big catches here and there. He's going to do what he does. We all know that. But the way they covered this team as well, even when Geno Smith had a little bit of time, it was hard to get the ball out except to Trey Tucker.
Yeah, I mean, those stats are going to be misleading in the passing game because it's frankly, and even though and I do compliment Trey Tucker for the game that he had, no doubt, because he had to do it. He had to get open, he had to catch, he had to run. But those were blown coverages. I mean, for the majority of it. And so, you know, those are the things that when we look at the context, and this is here you guys hear me say all the time about the context of stats, the context, and that's for people that like throw that stuff around to like prove a point. I'm like, well, what was the context though? Well, the context of this game were that this was a 20-point loss. Like, that's the context of it. So I don't give a shit what your stats say. You know?
Sure.
So it doesn't matter. I'm sorry. But, you know, but so when we look at that and when we look at what Geno had to do today and even the way that the running game unfolded today, you can't, you're running for your life. It doesn't matter. I had somebody that was, I'm going to reference a lot because we communicate a lot on the X there about folks talking about like Chip Kelly, like not calling a great game. And I'm like, we could have prime Bill Walsh calling this game, and we'd still stack up negative plays. It doesn't matter when the offensive line, they're literally getting bodied into the quarterback on every pass play. And then for the folks that want to be critical of Ashton Genty and his pass blocking ability, which is a liability, if he can't be out there on third down, then what the hell did we draft you for at number 6? I understand that he was going to be challenged, and some of the effort that we saw against the Chargers, I think, can be questioned. But the bottom line, though, is that he's figuring it out still in the NFL, right? When the offensive line is falling apart in front of you, when Dylan Parham, as you mentioned, is looking around for someone to block, and there's 2 or 3 guys coming at your quarterback, and what's Ashton Genty supposed to do? Like, you're not setting him up for success. It all starts up front. Every I'll get it out. Every coach you've ever heard in your life, what do they tell you? Offensively and defensively, it starts up front. It starts with the big nasties in the trenches. It happened to us on defense. It happened to us on offense. So when your skill players are impacted or by the lack of ability up front, then this is what you get. And you get a couple of broken plays to have some decent numbers on the board. But outside of that, you get a really uncompetitive football game. I will say it until I'm blue in the face. You can have the most dynamic offenses in the NFL, and there are some great ones out there. At the end of the day, how do you win in the NFL on the road, late in the season, and in the postseason? And how do you win championships? You control the line of scrimmage, you run the football, you play defense, you don't turn the ball over, you take away from the other team, you convert on third down, you don't allow third down convert. Those things it doesn't matter what the dynamicism is of the NFL. Those things win you championships. Look at the Eagles. And right now, the Raiders aren't doing any of it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And listen, I understand there's some people talking about refs, same bias. Look, you can have a number of you can have 2 penalties, and if the penalty is big enough, yes. But this game was never that close to me where bias. We talked early in the show, Murph, about the NFL and these calls that are coming out. But listen, that didn't have anything to do with it. You look at the penalties. The Raiders had 6 for 54 yards. The Commanders 7 for 54 yards. I look at stats like this. Third down efficiency for the Raiders, 3 of 14, 21%. For you talk about the line and playing big. For the Commanders, 5 of 10. They were 50% on third down conversions. 400 total net yards given up as well. We talked about the big rushing yards in the first half. 199 passing for Marcus Mariota as well. And obviously he rushed as well too for quite a bit. But you look at that and you're right. When you can't control the line of scrimmage, I don't care who you are. And this is where even good teams, when they lose, like the Eagles, they pulled it out at the end today against the Rams, in which was a really good game. But you look at that, and that was why, because they made a play. They made a play. They blocked the field goal at the end of the game that would have tied it, and they ran it back for a touchdown. But still, you have to be prepared. You have to win the line of scrimmage. And there's fair criticism out there now of John Spytek looking at this roster and not doing anything to take care of it. Now, he did draft 2 offensive linemen in the first 3 rounds, right? Where are those guys? Inactive. I don't know why they're inactive. When you have an offensive line playing like it is, you have Jackson Powers-Johnson there, didn't play him. It's only now into the 4th. We're going into the 4th week. I understand it, but it's early. At the same time, you can't expect to have different results when you're going backward. And to me, outside of Brandon Carroll, he's just not getting the job done. So maybe we'll see Philbin get more involved. I don't know if he'll make it public. Again, that's where the nepotism stuff comes in, because it's your son. Do you want to publicly embarrass your son? Well, you know what? If your son doesn't get the job done, you got to tell it like it is. I would expect Pete Carroll, being in the league as long as he has, his career, to do that. I just don't know. But what I do know is that if they roll out this same offensive line next week against Chicago and expect different results with the same preparation and all this, they're going to get ready. They'll have a full week to do so. But to me, there's a problem there. You cannot just say, well, it's early in the season, we're just going to slough it aside. No, it was so bad today that even somebody who's a part-time football watcher would look at that and say, well, geez, why can't that line block anybody? I mean, it's so insane. And I know a lot of you are out there, and it's got some validity to it, which is, well, then why did you draft Ashton Genty when you knew you needed offensive linemen? True. They did draft 2 offensive linemen. And in the first 3 rounds, you should expect those guys to compete. They have not even had them active. So to me, I think Ashton Jeanty, I'm going to defend that one until the cows come home. I just will. You can disagree. I'm totally fine with that. But I will tell you, there were other ways to do it. There's enough talent on that line that they should be playing better. Whether it's Meredith at center, maybe that's time to move away from that. Okay, put Jackson Powers-Johnson there and figure out the rest of that line. But give one of these young bucks a chance because they cannot do worse.
I cannot agree with that sentiment more. And the longer this season, and we're only 3 weeks in, but the longer this season goes on, the more confused I'm getting by the 2025 draft.
Fair.
Jack Bech has 2 catches. 2 catches. Like, and the one guy that you drafted 6 overall is getting load management because you want to save him for the second half. Like, 4 guys out of the 11 that were drafted were inactive today. I'm like, well, what was the strategy? Because because I've had some folks on again come at me about different opinions around, will Chip Kelly this and don't tell me that Chip Kelly and Pete Carroll weren't on the same page with what their intentions were offensively when we went into the 2025 season. Our first 2 drafted players were offensive players, and one of them is crickets, and the other one is the quote load management. Everybody else in the draft pretty much is non-existent. And so the idea that, well, the Raiders did not address offensive line. Yes, we did with 2 third-round picks. Guess who else was a third-round pick? Dylan Parham. And guess what? He started that next year. And so, and then there's some folks of the opinion well, you don't start offensive lineman rookies right away. Well, the Washington Commanders did, and their rookie kept Max Crosby in check, who's supposedly one of the best edge rushers in the league. Okay? So he's doing just fine. If there's talent there and you draft them, you play them. So I'm with you, Scott. It's like they did these things, but now they're not doing anything with them. Well, if they're that developmental, then what the hell were you drafting them for in the 3rd round, Spytech? And so these are more when these things unfold, I'm just becoming more and more confused on what the direction was because it's seemingly Pete Carroll and Patrick Graham were very much in lockstep. They very good. Patrick Graham had his defensive philosophy. Pete has his, and they kind of merged them together. And it seemingly they had a directed approach as a collective. Offensively, I don't know what the hell's going on. I don't. Tell me between Chip Kelly, Pete Carroll, and John Spytek, what was the intention of this offense? Because yes, I'm with you. I think Ashton Jeanty was absolute slam dunk. We needed to have him being drafted at number 6 because we were the worst team in the league last year running the football. We needed to have that. But then if the intention is then to play Pete ball, run the ball, control the clock, do all the things, well, then why do we draft Bash at number in the 2nd round? Maybe we should have drafted a lineman there. Maybe we should have drafted linemen that weren't, quote, developmental in the 3rd round so they could have a quicker impact because it's obviously the biggest weakness on this football team. And there are a lot. But that's the most glaring example of it. So it just becomes more and more confusing, Scott.
And I'm glad you brought up Besh because I like Besh, and I agree with you that not given enough opportunity when he needs to make catches. I mean, you saw the catch for the first down that he made. Geno's in trouble. He comes back. They talked about it on the broadcast, right? That he found the spot where he could bail out his quarterback right after the flat or after the marker to get the first down. Sat there, got the pass, got the first down. The kid's smart. He knows what to do. I'm not crowning him some amazing NFL. He's not Puka Nacua number 2. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying though is you got these guys, you drafted them. And the other point you brought up, which is really important for all of you out there who are now anti-Ashton Jeanty being the first pick overall, is they had as you just said, they had the 2nd round. And of course they did take guys in the 3rd round. So they did prioritize offensive linemen, but they're inactive. So either you drafted poorly and these guys can't play, which I don't necessarily think that we can know that yet because we haven't seen them play. We're not at practice every day, of course, or you're just not, you're inexplicably just not activating them for some reason because you have some issue and you want to continue to do what you're doing even though it's not working. So that to me, and I do want to talk about Ashton Jeanty in the next segment because he's still being underutilized. And I'm not just talking about running the ball. He can't run the ball because they're not opening the holes. When they did open the holes a few times, you saw what he did today. Had a couple nice runs. He showed his strength, his ability to put his hand on the ground and keep his balance and go. And we'll talk about that as well. We'll also talk about what is the way forward for the Raiders. We're going to step aside real quick for a break so you can hear from our buddies over at, and hear from me on our buddies over at Sleeper Picks. It's Murph and Scott. This is Silver and Black today, the postgame show. The Raiders get hammered on the road against the Commanders. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back. Hey everybody, it's time to tell you about Sleeper Picks. I'm going to make some Sleeper Picks here for you real quick. Of course, Sleeper Picks and Hog Media, the sponsors of our video this season on Silver and Black today and this postgame show as well. What I want to do is the Chiefs-Giants game tonight. I'm going to give you some picks. Don't forget, though, if you go to Sleeper Picks, it's the best way to play daily fantasy football. Not only that, you can get a $100 deposit match from us here and from the folks at Sleeper Picks. Just use the code GENTY. That's an exclusive code, GENTY. They will match your deposit $100 straight up. So you will start playing fantasy football, daily fantasy, with $200. All right, let me show you real quickly what I'm going to do tonight with this game. You got, of course, Patrick Mahomes, the Chiefs 0-2. Raider fans out there love that. And I think they're going to bounce back into Giants. Giants are playing better. So what I'm doing here, I'm looking at Mahomes rushing yards over 29.5. I'm going to take that one. So we got Mahomes there. Again, not betting with your heart, betting with your dollars. And then I'm going to look at Malik Neighbors. Anytime touchdowns, I think he's going to get a touchdown against the Chiefs, no problem there. So I got those two picks. Now I go back over and I'm going to go look at some of the other player props here. Again, this is what's great about this. They have real-time stats. You can do this. I like what Tracy's doing, 25.5 yards, 25.5 yards. I like the over on that one. So I'm taking that one. And then I want to look at other opportunities with him too. Right, anytime TD, I'm going to take that one as well. So you look at my entry here for a $20 entry on my daily fantasy on Super Picks. I'm going to hit 232.40. That's right. So go check it out. Don't forget, $100 deposit match for daily fantasy football with Sleeper Picks using our code GENTY. That's GENTY. Go check out Sleeper Picks. Get the app. Look for rules and regulations there inside that app. Have fun, guys. All right, it's Murph, it's Scott. This is the Silver and Black today post-game edition. The Raiders 42-24, 41-24 losers to the Washington Commanders. Do us a favor, make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your audio. Also, if you're watching us on video, hit the subscribe button there as well. For those of you watching us on Raiders Fan Radio, hello. You made a good choice. My buddy Murph and the crew there do an amazing job, so we appreciate you guys being with us here on our post-game show, which Murph is a part of every week, and we certainly appreciate him being here. We talked a lot about this. I was in the chat there. A lot of people saying we could have spent more money on offensive linemen. Becton, here's the thing with the offensive linemen, and yes, were there better options than Alex Kappa? Good point. My buddy MDM out in Hawaii made that point. True, but again, the thing we don't know is what we don't know. Did they try to get Becton? Maybe. Maybe the cost was too high. Maybe he didn't want to play for the Raiders. Believe it or not, a guy doesn't just want the money because if he can get equal money from 4 different teams, he can choose where he wants to go. So again, we don't know that, but your point is well taken. And I don't disagree, as Murph said before the break, that, okay, what is Spytek's plan? He drafted 2 offensive linemen in the first 3 rounds. Why aren't they playing? Why are they completely inactive? They're not even there for rotation if somebody gets hurt and you got to roll somebody in. They're not there. They're not active for the game. That's my big question. We'll get back to that in a second. I do want to talk about the Ashton Jeanty thing because not only rushing the ball and some of the issues, and of course you had Ryan Clark, who, I'm sorry, I just disagree with a lot with Ryan Clark, saying that he doesn't have the it factor. How do you know that when you're running behind the worst offensive line in the NFL? You don't. But here's my other thing, Murph, and I want to get your point of view on this because you've watched a lot of football, obviously a lot of Raiders football. Ashton Jeanty in college, too, could catch the ball out of the backfield. I've seen and this has got to go to a question for Chip Kelly. Why isn't Ashton Jeanty being used with swing passes, screen passes? He is a dynamic playmaking kid. Why is he not on the field when you need him to make other plays? You don't have to just give him the ball and let him run it. You can throw the ball to him, too, especially if you're under duress. Get that ball out quickly. You have a quick check down to Ashton Jeanty coming out of the backfield. And suddenly you got a guy in open space who knows how to kind of operate in open space. I just don't understand how, again, I was very critical last week of the same thing. And they come out this week, again, on those third down plays. I get it. Your best third down back, by the way, was also inactive, which was Raheem Mostert. I don't understand why do you sign a 33-year-old running back, veteran, and every week he's inactive? I just don't get it. It's not like he's a young developmental player. Either you have Get rid of him if you're not going to use him. Why would you have him? But he certainly is a guy who does a lot on third down. He also catches the ball at the backfield. But I don't understand why you don't have your best playmakers in there when you need a big play.
Oh, gosh, Scott. Again, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And on the Mostert thing, like, what's the point of having a 33-year-old inactive running back occupying a roster spot? It makes zero sense. It doesn't. I don't get. Maybe they're saving him for the second half of the season too. But you know, one of the strengths of Ashton Genty's game is catching the football. Like that, we went into this season expecting to see 3 guys with vice grips for hands, if not 4. When you got Ashton Genty, Brock Bowers, Jakobi Meyers, and Jack Besh, they're talking about some solid pass catchers, especially under contention. The idea that Ashton Genty is not getting the football in space, that is the one thing that not one thing, but that's the biggest, I think, indictment of Chip Kelly's play calling, is the idea that, listen, I will tell you, I don't love plays that develop behind the line of scrimmage. I don't like draw plays. I don't like tosses. I don't like bubble screens. I don't like any of that stuff, because if it's 3rd and 2 and you got to make your running back run 9 yards for a first down, I don't think that that's a great strategy. But that said, Chip Kelly's an awful smart, innovative guy. There's a way to figure out how to get Ashton Genty in space. And if you can get him in space by, like what you're talking about, you know, running screens, running tosses, whatever those things are, get him in space and get him ISO'd against a DB. He trucks DBs. We saw him do it again today. Like, that's not a favorable matchup for the defense when you get him out in space against defensive backs. You can't tell me that you can't spread this thing out a little bit and get him the ball in space. And the idea that they don't do it at all, like that, it's one thing if they, you know, like this game we were critical, saying like, well, feed Ashton Genty, like run him more. Like clearly he gets momentum as he gets going, and we need to get him the ball more. But at least they were still running him. I don't know how many carries he had today, but it seemingly there was a bunch in there. Certainly a lot more than we saw in the first 2 weeks. So I applaud that. But then why not figure out other ways to get him the ball? And there's no, like, they don't even run one screen, let alone, you know what I'm saying? Like, so Scott, that's the part that absolutely is driving me nuts. If you're not getting the protection and the blocking that you need up front in between the tackles, well, then get outside of it. Get your guy out there and let him go make a play. That's it. So I will definitely be critical of Chip Kelly in that fashion. And this is just another one of those things that, and why not? That's like what you were saying earlier about, like, what do you got to lose? What do you know what I'm saying? What do you? You're going to not convert in a different way? Like, just try it. At a minimum, you got to at least give them an opportunity.
Yeah, and listen, I saw a lot of people. I was chatting with a lot of people during the game about Brock Bowers. Like, Brock Bowers, he shouldn't play. He's hurt. Well, I don't know how hurt he is. Is he 100%? Probably not. But he's a gamer. He's going to play, and you want your guy on there. And again, as Mo and I talked about this weekend, I know you guys talked about on your show, is if he's on the field, they have to account for him, right? So they have to account for him, and just having him on the field is an advantage, but they couldn't get him involved today. But again, you can't get the ball to anybody if your quarterback is constantly being chased and your pocket is collapsing. It's not happening. Look, Geno Smith can move in the pocket. He's a wily veteran. There's times when I watched the game today, they might have had 4 more sacks if Aiden O'Connell's the quarterback. I'll put it that way. And that's not a criticism of Aiden O'Connell. It's just, you have a veteran who's been there, who knows how to step up, who knows how to move around the pocket, has better feet, even at his advanced years. But I'll tell you that you can't get the ball to Brock Bowers. You can't get the ball to Michael Mayer, who unfortunately got a concussion earlier in the game. And even those wide receivers, Trey Tucker, like you said, most of his stuff was on broken plays. But it's hard to get the ball. It's hard to run your offense when you can't establish the run, because you have to be able to do that. Chip Kelly spreads the ball around, yes. But if you watch any of his stuff from when he was in the NFL last year, when he won the national championship with Ohio State, it was all predicated on establishing the run. Guess what you can't do? You can't run the ball because your offensive line is crap, because Brandon Carroll can't coach, clearly. So that alone takes away all of that. So yes, they're all interrelated. The failures are happening because the core basis, the foundation of running your offense, is an offensive line who can at least be above average. If they were above average, like they were in the first game, I would argue, then guess what? Then you can do that. Yes, they didn't run block well in the first game, but they did pass block well. And that's why Geno Smith had such a nice game and he was so efficient. He had the time to do it. And it's not like Geno Smith all the time. He goes through little fits where he does hold the ball too long, but overall he doesn't. And so to me, I know it sucks because you want to find boogeymen and you want to find people to blame. But at the end of the day, Murph, you can't run your offense. And again, Chip Kelly deserves some criticism. Don't get me wrong. Hear me clear on that. But you also can't run that offense if you can't block. And I was saying it during the game, my friend, if you don't have the Jimmies and the Joes up front, guess what? It doesn't matter what running back, what quarterback, what wide receivers you have, you ain't going to get it done.
No, you can have the most brilliant strategy in the world, but when you can't do the simple things, when you can't execute the play, when you can't, you're talking about basic mechanics and interpretation of run blocking and in terms of pickups and all that kind of stuff. And when it comes time to, even if you do pick it up correctly, but then you get again bodied into the quarterback, well then it doesn't matter what you're calling. It doesn't matter what, Geno, like for those that are out there being like, oh, he's hanging on the ball too long. Yeah, because he's running for his life. Like he's got 2 seconds. 2 seconds before he's got defenders in his face, and he's trying to keep a play alive. So I will give him, credit on that idea that, he's not just dancing around with happy feet. Because you're, Scott, I think you were being generous when you said there would have been 4 more sacks with Aiden O'Connell. There probably would have been 7. Like, you think about how many times we saw somebody get a hand on Geno and him duck it and come up around there. You know what I'm saying? Or even like, and for easy people, but even Derek later in his career, when he would just go to the ground. He was like, he started getting defenders around him and he wouldn't even try to fight and get out of that stuff and escape. He would just go to the ground. Geno was fighting for his life out there. So I don't hold him as much as an indictment of him holding onto the ball too long, because he's trying to keep the play alive. And listen, believe it or not, just because you escape said defender doesn't mean that your eyes are set automatically downfield when you're fighting for your balance. You're trying to, you know what I'm saying? You're trying to see if someone else is coming at you. Like, it takes a second for a quarterback to recover before they can start scanning the field and then deliver the ball downfield. That's why they call it a scramble drill. And that's why all your wide receivers are coached to like go back to the quarterback, because the quarterback has to get himself into a position to where he can deliver the ball. And if you're too far downfield, he can't do that. So you got to work back to the quarterback. You got to help him out. And we saw a couple of guys today. You mentioned Jack Besh earlier. The one catch that he had was him doing that. He was fighting back to the quarterback to get himself open and converted on a play. But that's not just Geno camping out in the pocket, like just, kind of looking around for somebody to throw to, and the protection breaks down and then he takes a sack in the pocket. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a guy that's got 1,000, 2 1,000, run for your life. Like, jeez.
Surrounded by guys that are 6'6", 6'7", at 3 something coming at you, and then the linebackers with speed. I mean, it's very hard. It's easy for us to watch. I mean, even we all forget at times what it can be like on the field there, surrounded by these guys coming at you that quickly, especially when those people pour in. So it's insane. Lastly, what I want to talk about here is the defense, because the defense had played so well, especially in the second half. And you talked about the Commanders pretty much shutting down Max Crosby. Max Crosby's always disruptive, never taken away anything from Max. Amazing player. He had the late sack, which was incredible. He blew up that play when the Commanders were running very vanilla offense just to run out the clock. Still give him credit for it. But I think, too, what we saw with the offense here is just they never looked set. They never looked – we talk about the offense getting into a rhythm. The defense never seemed to really get a good jump off the ball at all. I mean, until that last sack by Crosby, they weren't any. Marcus Mariota had all day, not only when he ran the ball, but when he threw the ball as well. Now, he's not a great passer, so of course he didn't always punish the Raiders for it. But man, I was just struck by how tired this defense looked. I'm talking early in the game, so there's no excuse later in the game when you've been on the field for a while. But when you look at how they got off the plane into this game, it just didn't seem like there was much juice there. And I don't understand that, because you're coming back from a bad loss on Monday Night Football against your division foe. You'd think that this team would be ready to go. Again, I look to coaching, but I wonder what happened with those guys that they just could not get the aggressiveness and the get-go that they needed that we saw in the previous 2 games.
Yeah, Scott, I'm with you too on that, and I'm going to say something that's going to be probably a little controversial here. And I see some people talking about, Max wanting out. Well, Max can want out all he wants. He's got too much dead money in the cap this year for the Raiders to move on from him in a healthy way when it comes to maintaining the salary cap. So that ain't going to happen. But what I will tell you is this, and I think that you probably would, in a quiet moment, get Max Crosby to agree. If by the trade deadline next year, if this thing isn't going in an incredibly positive direction, I'm trading Max Crosby. I'm sorry. And listen, he is so many people's favorite player, and I love him too. But when you're talking about what we have in terms of need and what his production is, if you can get a bounty of picks for him and draft capital or otherwise, you absolutely need to make that move. He gets a lot of attention, and we apologize for Max a lot because of the level of attention that he gets, and it's deserved because he's such a great player. But so does Nick Bonito. So does Trey Hendrickson. So does Micah Parsons. So does Myles Garrett. So does TJ Watt. Those guys all get just as much attention and are still getting to the quarterback and putting him on the ground. We don't seen that out of Max. We're seeing it in garbage time. So I tiptoe into that because I know that's a sensitive topic. And again, I love Max Crosby, but the NFL is all about your value. And right now, his cost versus his value is upside down. I equated a lot to the crazy hot scale. Right? It's when you're crazy overrides your hot, well, then sometimes you make a decision to move on. Well, right now, Max's productivity is relatively low and his value is high. So while I don't think that would happen this year, it might happen next year. And he would probably welcome it, frankly. I mean, if this team can't, I mean, where's Malcolm Kuntz? He finally makes a play and it's a face mask penalty. Like, where are these guys? Booker is seemingly the only guy on the defensive line that's making plays earlier in the game. He causes the fumble. This is a defensive tackle causing a fumble on a running quarterback 30 yards downfield on Marcus Mariota. And you mentioned we couldn't do anything with it once we did find an opportunistic play on defense. But that's the guy, the one guy that's on the defensive line. And when this was supposed to be the strength of our defense, because we knew that we were going to have questionable secondary based on just experience and youth alone. And here our linebackers are playing relatively well and got a very pleasantly surprised with the productivity of Devin White and Landon Roberts and even Eichenberg in spots but it was the front four. These guys were supposed to rock. That's Pete Carroll defense. Get pressure up front. That's Al Davis football. Get pressure up front. That way, you know what I'm saying? And we're not seeing any of it. So at what point, and just like I used to say this about Derek, at what point do you hold him accountable? I don't care if he's your favorite player or not.
It's a business.
At what point do we stop making excuses and look at the productivity and go, well, it's not there? Again, that's why I tiptoe, Scott, because I know it's a sensitive thing when it comes to Max. But if the productivity isn't there, at what point then can we fairly as fans look, or critics or media or otherwise, look at it and go, okay, well, at what point then do we stop holding him, or do we start holding him accountable for the impact that he's having on a football game? I don't care about his work ethic is brilliant. He's an absolute, the most Raider we've seen in many, many years. I mean, we love that guy. But if it makes better sense for the Raiders to consider a different direction, again, I'm not even trying to sell a point. I'm just trying to ask the questions here because you're right. Defensively, it ain't happening. So what can we do
and I'll
differently?
tell you, I mean, and I want to call out too, Hoffy did a $10 super chat over on your channel on Raiders Fan Radio. So that goes right to the One Nation Foundation. By the way, any super chats also on our channel, Silver and Black Today, also go to the the One Nation Foundation. I put Raider in there because Raider Nation, you can't saying it differently. But nonetheless, so if you do those donations, they're going right to Murph's group and to all the charities they support, which he will tell you about in just a moment. But Hoffy says here, even if you trade Max, do you trust the Raiders to draft well? Great point, because we were just talking earlier in the show about John Spytek, who's only had one draft, to be fair. But already we're seeing some troubling signs because you have half these guys aren't active, and of course you have others that aren't playing well so far. So it's a fair question. And in years past, I would say I would have no confidence because the Raiders haven't drafted well. with John Spytek, it's hard to say after one draft. So we'll have to see what happens there. But it's a fair question, Murph. And the point is, though, is just because you're not sure they're going to draft well doesn't mean you don't trade a player who has a high value at his highest value before it starts going down. It's just like a stock. You're not going to sell a stock when it's low. You might buy when it's low, but you're not going to sell it when it's low. You're going to sell it when it's at its highest, where you can make the most out of it, and maybe it sets up your team. And like you said, nobody wants to talk about that yet, but it should never be out of the question. I mean, I know Jerry Jones is Jerry Jones, and what he did with Micah Parsons was a different situation. But if you think it's going to help your team and set you up, and to your point, you're right, you got to hold Max accountable for his performance, right? To say that every game he plays is an all-pro game is just not true. It's just not true, because if you watch enough, so you have to be able to do that. But we'll see how it all goes. But the Raiders have plenty to work on. I'm interested to see. You're not going to get a lot of insight, clearly, when Pete Carroll, who I'm sure is talking to the media as we are talking now, or at least was a few minutes ago, we'll start to see what he says tomorrow. If there's going to be any changes, are we going to see competition? If I was a coach, which clearly I'm not, and I don't put myself in any kind of same arena as Pete Carroll, but Murph, if it's me, I go into next week and saying, you know what, offensive line's not getting it done, so we're opening it up. We're going to take the best. We're going to take the best 5 guys out of practice this week, and they're going to start.
Yeah, I think that's got to be the move. I mean, you put them all in, shake them all up, give them everybody an opportunity to earn a spot, and you look at what the best grouping is, and then go from there. I mean, I don't see how else what other way you could possibly approach it at this point, because it's like it's either, again, I'll go back to that context thing that we talk about so much, is that that's only 1 and 2, right? Like, you look at it and you go like, well, okay, well, like it's not that big of a it's not the end of the world. It's out of conference. It was on the road. It was the East Coast. It was yada yada yada. These are the games that the Raiders had to win to be taken seriously and to have any significant push for the 2025 season. These are the games that they absolutely have to win. You think that you're just going to march into Chicago now and get that W? I don't get where I'm at home, but still, point being, though, that all of a sudden that Indianapolis game,
really
that
well.
Doesn't look like it's a pushover anymore, does it, Raider Nation? Then you got to deal with the Broncos. We got to deal with the Chiefs, of course. We got, like, all of a sudden now, other than maybe that Titans game, now all of a sudden this stretch of schedule isn't as easy as we thought it was going to be, and it only gets harder from here out. So from there out, when you start getting into the back half of the season. So it shouldn't be considered an overreaction based on the context, because we haven't been playing. The 2 of these three teams that we played have either been under-talented or they're hurt. Like, when you look at the Commanders today, there's so many injuries on this football team. They had no business hanging what they did on us offensively and handling us the way that they did defensively. Can you imagine? This is what I said about the Chargers game last week. Can you imagine what that game would have looked like if Khalil Mack hadn't gone out? Lord have mercy. We wouldn't have scored 9. Can you imagine what the defense would have looked like today if Dedrick Wise was in the lineup? Or what if that was Austin Eckler and not a 7th-round rookie back there? What if that was Jaden Daniels? My God, we'd have lost by 60.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, look, it's time to sound the alarm.
And here's why I would never, after 3 weeks and being 1 and 2, say push the panic button, right? I would never say that. But my point on why I'm more close to that than I would normally be is because the last 2 games have not been competitive. Not even competitive. If they were competitive and you lose on the road on the East Coast in a close game, despite all their injuries, okay, at least you're in the game, you're competing, and make a mistake, whatever. Or the Charger game. It's a rivalry game. Yes, it's at home, but it's a game. They're coming off a big win against the Chiefs. You understand it if it's close and you come up short. You say, okay, man, if we can just fix this thing, then the next time we play them, we'll beat them. Or the next game, we're going to get better. But in actuality, it's gone the reverse direction. And I think that's the biggest concern here, even early. I don't think it's time to mail it in yet. I projected 8 wins. Mo said 7. I'm thinking more 6 now. 8 was kind of my ceiling. I'm thinking 6, and that's maybe being generous based on what we saw today, right? So if that's the case, then there has to be questions, and there has to be everything on the table. But I want to see competition at these positions where you're seeing underperformance. And I want to see something happen with the offensive line coaching and Brendan Carroll, because it ain't working, And you cannot let that fester, because then what happens? Then you lose the players even more, and they're not going to perform. If they got coaching and they don't believe that they're getting any better and the coaching isn't helping and they don't see any reason to have hope themselves, guess what happens? That's when you start to see seasons spiral into complete and utter dumpster fire. So I think that's what we're at there. So we'll have to see what happens. I'm interested to see what happens over the next few days, what we hear out of this Raider organization. Murph, as we always do, as I said earlier, all of our super chats here, everything we do goes to the One Nation Foundation. And every show, just for those folks who are on who haven't heard about it or don't know about it, I'll let Murph tell everybody about it because it's very important. The work they do is so great. So Murph, tell everybody about the One Nation Foundation, what you guys do and how they can get involved.
Thank you, Scott, so much. So you can find our website. It's onenationfoundation.net, and you can donate directly there. Any of those donations that come through PayPal, there's no Google cut. There's nothing. It just 100% of that money goes to the One Nation Foundation, and we take all that money and give it to Raiders-related charities. As Scott mentioned, the super chats that are in here, any of the advertising dollars that we get from our advertising partners who are currently with FanDuel right now, amongst some others, HTO, all that money goes into the pool for the One Nation Foundation, and we're giving to great Raiders-related charities like the good folks at Raider Dad and also Bolitnikoff. So we appreciate those monetary donations so very, very much, because we're helping out a lot of young folks that are in need. And even if you can't support it monetarily, we just ask for your like, a subscribe, a thumbs up, anything you can do to share on the social medias or otherwise, whether that be from Raiders Fan Radio or the One Nation Foundation. Any of that support is greatly, greatly appreciated. Thank you to Scott, as always, for the platform in here, and thank you for the donations as well. And thank you, Raider Nation. We always make sure that we remind everyone when we write checks, like when I write one to Angela Bolitnikoff at the end of this month for $10,000, I make sure that she knows that it's coming from the kind folks and supporters of Silver and Black Today, Raiders Fan Radio, and the listening audience. That it's, like I say all the time, we're just knuckleheads with microphones that like to talk about our favorite football team. And I know it's a job for you, Scott, but still, you represent Raider Nation incredibly well, and we're just incredibly thankful for your support. And I will say this too, last week I kind of pontificate a little bit about my appreciation for the platform and the foundation. But something else I want to hit on, I want to compliment you and Mo, is that I don't listen to a lot of Raider podcasts because I don't want someone else's opinion to be my opinion. But you guys are so well balanced, and so you really deliver an interesting way to approach the Raiders in a way to where you don't have that crazy ass emotional investment like me and a lot of other Raider fans do. I can't tell you how much that is very, very much appreciated, and especially too when you look at legacy media and you look at mainstream media and the way this stuff is covered. You were talked about Ryan Clark, and I would like to remind everybody that's in here listening right now, anybody that's watching us on the post-game show here at Silver and Black Today, you know more about the Raiders than Ryan Clark does. And so the idea that you patronize shows like ours, we can't thank you guys enough for that. And I think that Scott and Mo epitomize that better than anyone in this space, that these are guys that are in mainstream. They're, it's Bleacher Report, it's Odyssey, it's these big networks that are supporting Silver and Black Today, and you're getting a very balanced approach and a fair approach and an incredibly knowledgeable approach about that. And I can't appreciate that enough, especially in light of a week like we had, where you've got people out there on the four-letter network talking about the Raiders, and they have no idea what they're talking about. So it just increases the importance for stuff like this.
And I appreciate that. I really do, Murph, coming from you too, because I know how level-headed you are. Even as a fan, I know you get your craziness in, but I enjoy it. I love watching your stuff. It gives me the flavor. That's why I have you on the postgame show too, because I think it's important for fan voices to be heard and to get that out right after a loss like today too, and watching the chat, the people on both our channels who are watching, to be able to hear and commiserate on that. It's important. It's an important piece of fanhood, especially in Raider Nation, where it really is a family. I was telling a friend of mine who was asking me about covering the Raiders, and he's like, "Oh, I heard, Raider," because of course they hear all the bad things about Raider fans. And I completely squash that and say, no, listen, all that junk you hear you can't even understand how close-knit of a community it is. Even people who've never met each other and they're just online, whatever, they share something special, and they make that come to reality with how they support the One Nation Foundation, which has been remarkable. The work that you and Jeff, Michelle, and everybody have done has been amazing. So I certainly appreciate that. And, we always tell it like it is. And sometimes you guys don't like to hear what Mo and I say from our perspective. And that's okay. I don't have a problem with that, right? We can agree to disagree. Unfortunately, in this country now, people disagree and they want to hate each other. I don't hate people when they disagree with me. I might argue back and forth with them, but I'm never going to take it personally, or I'm never going to use malice against them because they disagree. And that goes with Raiders football, right? Because I understand the passion of being a fan. We're all a fan of something, of some team. And being a San Diego Padres fan for most of my life, believe me, I understand pain. So I can relate. And so that makes a lot of sense to me. And I certainly appreciate everything you do. Murph, man, I want to thank you for being with me, man. We'll see you next week after a win, maybe, against the Bears.
I hope so, Scott. If we don't take care of the Bears next week at Allegiant Stadium, fire them all.
I love it. All right. There you go, Murph. Make sure you follow Raiders Fan Radio everywhere you can and support the One Nation Foundation. And I want to thank you guys all for being with us here on the Postgame Show. Mo and I will be back on Tuesday. We'll do a little more dissection of the game after we've been able to watch some film. We're not total film guys, but we watched it enough to know we can see how bad that offensive line was, but we'll tell you even more so after we dig into the tape. But we will be back on Tuesday covering that, as well as taking your phone calls. If you want to be part of the show, by the way, we take phone calls. We play them on our show, 702-900-7869. That's 702-900-7869. For our producer here at Odyssey, Mr. Mike Robier, for Murph, I'm Scott Branson. This has been Silver and Black Today. Reminder, get that $300 from Sleeper Picks. They bring us the video. They're our sponsor this year. $100 match on your $100 deposit to play daily fantasy football up on Sleeper Picks. Everybody, have a great week. I know it'll be rough after what you had to watch today, but hang in there, and we will see you next week. Take care, everybody. Raider Nation, have a good week.